Cassette 2. Side 1. Unit 8. Points of view. 2. Listening. Part 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to Burning Issues, the weekly programme where you, the listener, give your views on items in the news. This week, we look at cigarette advertising. The European Commission has recently proposed a total ban on all advertising and promotion of tobacco. But while most European countries support the ban, the British government has just made a new voluntary agreement with the tobacco industry which merely limits advertising. So what is the present situation in Britain? Since 1965, there has been a ban on cigarette advertising on TV, and since 1971, there's been a series of voluntary agreements negotiated between the government and the tobacco industry. The current agreement says that ads must contain health warnings. They must not appeal to the young or encourage them to smoke. And they must be approved by the Advertising Standards Authority. They also restrict advertising in magazines for young women and children. These are not allowed to carry tobacco advertising if young women, aged 15 to 24, account for a quarter or more of their readers. And they restrict advertising on shop fronts and on posters which are near schools or can be seen from children's playgrounds. There is a separate agreement which restricts sports sponsorship. In 1977, tobacco companies agreed not to sponsor sports where most participants are under 18. It was because of the ban on cigarette advertising on TV in 1965 that the tobacco companies decided to move into sports sponsorship. And it has proved to be a very successful way of advertising their product. For example, during a recent Formula One Grand Prix series on BBC television, their names and logos were visible on television pictures for 8 minutes of every hour of screen time, which is more time than the commercial TV stations give over to all advertising. The government sees no need to abandon these agreements and put a total ban on advertising. Instead, it claims that there are more effective ways to cut the number of smokers. These methods include high taxes, warnings on cigarette packets, health education and smoking restrictions in public places and at work. So what are the facts and figures about smokers and smoking? Fewer than a third of British adults smoke, but that's still 13.8 million people. Numbers have been dropping steadily for 20 years, though the drop among women has been less dramatic. The number of teenage girls smoking has actually gone up. About 1 in 10 children aged 11 to 15 smokes regularly, slightly more girls than boys. Although tobacco sales in Britain have been falling for 10 years, worldwide they have increased by 1 to 2% each year. The tobacco industry has shifted its attention to countries in South America, Africa, Asia and Eastern Europe. And a final point of information. The British tobacco industry spends more than £113 million a year on advertising. Now, over to you. We've had hundreds of calls from listeners who phoned in to give their opinion of the question we asked you last week, which was, do you think the government should support a ban on cigarette advertising? Here's a representative selection.